Hello, Joanne May here to show you a painting of a house portrait that I have done recently of one of my friends' homes. It's a beautiful house with lots of trees and foliage around it. So I did the sketch first with pencil, and I'm just touching up the last few bushes around the corner of the house there. Using a ruler for straight edges of the house, but when I start inking the shape, I'm not too very careful if a line is a little wonky, a little bit wiggly. You can see that right there on the edge of the home, the eaves there, a little bit out of perfect square or perfectly straight is, I think, more artistic. Not to worry if you're doing a sketch and you want it to be a little bit looser design. It works very well. Just feel free to do it in that design style if that pleases you. So I'm using a number 8 micron pen that does bleed if you put watercolor on the ink while it's still slightly wet. So I waited a day after I did the drawing with the pen to let it dry overnight before I started adding the color. So I put quite a lot of detail into this home. It's a gift for my friend, and I know that they've lived in this home for quite a number of years, and I wanted to make sure that it was enough true to their knowledge of the house. When you live in a place for a long time, you know so much about it. And I had a couple of photographs that I was going off of. Very difficult to get the detail even in the photographs because of the trees and the foliage and the leaves that were all around. It also was a wintertime set of photos, and I made this into a spring, sort of summery design with lots of leaves on the trees and green grass. So I was using some artistic license, not knowing exactly. The hardest part for me was knowing what that walkway in front of the house looked like. So to my friend, I apologize if it's not realistic, but I hope that you see your home in this when it's finished. Very important was to get a lot of these trees looking fairly accurate. Again, I'm using a lot of decision making on my own to make them look like the branches are going in the direction that I think they might be going. The photograph was cut off at the top end, so these river birch tree, these 4 trunks of the river birch in the front only looked like trunks. They didn't have foliage on them. So I did look up some photographs of other birch trees, river birch, and the shaggy bark, and tried to make it look a little bit realistic, but not worrying too much about the realism. So this micron pen is a fairly thick pen. You see I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I added in quite a bit of detail in the tops of the yews, I believe is what these were, evergreen bushes. There were a couple of those right at the front of the house, and also some very nice landscaping right up against the house around that window as well. I'm putting quite a lot of dark in to have some contrast already in the ink before I started in with watercolor wash. Spending some time on those leaves of that tree on the right, adding more branches. Toward the end of this video, you'll just see a photograph of all of the wash after a portion of the painting. I didn't get the whole painting in, but when you look at the photograph at the end, I think you'll see the work of the layers that went into the coloring of these different areas. The front door is beautiful. It's a red brick, which is more of a rust color, and the front door is a deeper red shade. Beautiful colonial style home. You see me putting in some of the lines of the siding. I had straight slat siding on horizontal siding on the middle and right sections of the house, and this left section, and just here and there putting in some indication of the red brick. Definitely don't need to put all of them in. Just here and there. So there you see a little corner of the photo in the winter scene with the snow and lots of greenery in the yard. So here I am now starting with a mop brush, sort of medium size. There's not a lot of sky, but I'm going to be starting with the blue of the sky. I'll try to go around the birch trunks and some of those tree trunks on the left, but painting right over a green tree, the blue will not come through the green that will be on top of that. So now putting in a little bit of the shaded part. Because of all the trees, there's quite a lot of shadow that will be on the house. That middle section and the right section are white or off-white siding, and so a gray mixture is good to indicate shadows. Dropping in this darker gray for the roof. Going around a little skylight there. Wanting it to have some variation in color and just dabbing out where I think the sun would be hitting. And now adding a little more shadow of the trees across the roof. Just blending out a little bit so there are no hard lines. Some shadows have very, very sharp hard lines, and other shadows have very soft edges. So depending on how close the thing is, in this case the trees, are to the place where the cast shadow is appearing, the closer it is, the sharper the line will be. These trees are a bit away from the house, except for those there on the left. So I did later drop in more deeper shadow shade. Working on some of the dimensions, some of the darker areas here now. There's a pretty strong shadow right there, so you see that harder diagonal line coming across there. is from one of those portions of the roof, creating a shadow onto the lower part of that middle section of the house. And a strong shadow to the left of that window as well. So now I'm using, I believe this is a number 6 brush, could be a 4. It's a round brush. And I just used a little tester paper to compare with a color photo that I had to try to be accurate with this shade of reddish rust colored brick. The shutters are an actual gray color with some white trim and some bright light that is shining on portions of the windows. You see now I have that chimney, and I'm needing to make the red of the door, and so you'll see this color, beautiful shade of red for the front door. Adding more shadow across the top of the door. So my overall process started with the sky, went to the house, and I'm doing quite a lot of detail with the house before going into the greens, the grasses and the bushes and the trees. And that is so that when I put the leaves on the trees, the house will still be able to be seen through the transparency of the leaves. It's not exactly accurate to the way one sees a home, especially in the summer when all the leaves are in bloom on a tree, on multiple trees like this. But because this was a house portrait, very important to be able to see the house. So you'll see in the last photograph just how much transparency there is in those leaves, while still having some dimension. I use quite a variety of greens and blues to create the lights and darks of the various leaves on those trees. Interesting to me always when I paint a house that windows are so dark. The only time you might have light windows is when it's nighttime and there are lights on inside the house. But during the day, especially if it's a bright sunny day, the windows are so very dark. I kept having to go back again and again, adding more and more darkness. Now that lower center window, large window there, on the other hand, reflected the blue sky. Pretty much blue is the background of it, but also these bushes and the trees overhead required me to put in quite a lot of color and reflections of those leaves and branches. And so same with these windows on the right side. So you aren't seeing me add that in yet, but you'll see that in the final photo. So here we are. After all of the other colors are put in, you can see the transparency of the leaves so that the house is the focal point. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing the painting as much as it was there of a house portrait.